one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty,
and justice for all.
justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you, Councilor Houseman. Also on our agenda tonight, we have Senator Joan Lovely and State Representative Jerry Paracella to give an update of what's going on at the State House. So if we're ready to go, we'll get through our agenda. We'll start with Brian Ailes. Are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody, council members. Thank you for affording me some time this evening. We are in very unusual times.
Mr. Ailes?
Yeah.
Brian, I forgot to do something already. Can I just put you on hold for a moment?
Of course.
All right, I have to read my script.
Yep.
Script from remotely conducted city council meetings. Confirming member access. As a preliminary, we already know that everybody's here. So we'll go introduction to remote meeting. Good evening. This is an open meeting of the Beverly City Council and is being conducted remotely. Consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspended the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as adequate alternative public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting may feature public comment, and it will because we have 7 public hearings. For this meeting, the City Council is convening by telephone and video conference via Google Hangouts as posted on the city's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised live and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other participants or viewers may be able to see and hear you, and anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. You all have the option to turn off your video if you're participating via computer. All participants should keep their microphones or phones muted unless recognized by me to reduce background noise and feedback. Please wait until the person speaking is finished before speaking so we can clearly hear all participants. In addition, because of the remote meeting, I'm going to read Rule 22 of the Rules and Regulations of the Beverly City Council. Rule 22, all subcommittees of the council shall cause records to be kept of their proceedings. They shall report by ordinance, order, or resolve unless otherwise provided by law. No subcommittee shall act by separate consultation, and no report as a body shall be received unless agreed in subcommittee, actually notified and assembled for the purpose in hand, and signed by a majority of the councils of the subcommittee. Every subcommittee to which any subject may be referred shall report thereon as soon as possible after full consideration thereof and a vote thereon. However, if the council may by majority vote order any matter pending before the subcommittee to be acted upon by the subcommittee at its next meeting and or to be forthwith returned to the full council. So that's what we want to do. Anything in subcommittee will be returned to the full council to vote on this evening. And I would ask Ms. Kent to take a roll call vote and hope that 8 other councilors agree with me on this.
Ames? Counselor Ames?
Yes. Yes.
Feldman? Yes. Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Brady?
Yes.
Houseman? Houseman?
Scott, say yes.
Rand?
Houseman, yeah. Houseman, yes. Sorry, I was on mute.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanci?
Yes. Finally, meeting ground rules for public hearings. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will invite the council to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. You may mute yourself or be muted by the meeting host by clicking the microphone mute, unmute icon. pressing the mute button on your telephone, or by pressing number *6 on your telephone keypad. Please reserve the chat function for technical difficulties and strictly the city council, not for public comment in the chat area. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please state your name and affiliation before speaking. Regarding public comment, after members have spoken, I will afford public comment as follows. I will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once I have a list of all public commentators, I will call on each by name and afford 3 minutes for every comment. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Thank you, everybody. Any questions? Hearing no questions, Mr. Ailes, I'm sorry I interrupted you, and you are back on, sir.
That's quite all right, Mr. President. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to take some time and just explain a few things. We're in very unusual times in the city and in the state, and many of us are focused on the critical decisions necessary to help with the current health crisis. Certainly that focus is important, but unfortunately there's another aspect to the crisis that I know you're all aware of. I asked to address you this evening to give you some information and data regarding the economic impact that we as a community could expect from the pandemic over the next several years, as well as to outline some of the difficult decisions we collectively make in the coming months and beyond. Unfortunately, the impact of the state's economy will undoubtedly be significant and will affect state and local government for multiple fiscal years. We are already seeing this impact in our city's finances, areas of revenues that we typically rely on to fund our operating budget, and our free cash levels are not performing well, or in some instances have virtually stopped. Areas like building permit revenue, new purchases of motor vehicles, and delinquent payments have halted. And we expect future reductions in the areas of meals and room tax and a number of other smaller revenue streams. We can also reasonably expect a lower collection rate of property taxes, as many of our neighbors are experiencing financial difficulty as a result of this pandemic. We have begun restricting general fund spending across all departments, with limited exceptions to public safety, public health, and COVID-related activities, to ensure we do not spend more than we receive in revenue for this fiscal year. This will also help with the city's reserve. Issued a memorandum detailing points discussed by the state's leading economists related to the economic fallout of this pandemic. If you have not read that memorandum yet, I strongly encourage you to do so. It provides a level of detail in areas that I intend to only highlight in broad brushstrokes this evening. In short, the general consensus of those experts, the economic impact will be deeper than that of the last two recessions, both in terms of revenue shortfall to the Commonwealth as well as unemployment figures. There was also a consensus that no one knows how long it will take for the economy to recover. To give you perspective of this expected revenue loss, one economist stated that expected tax revenue will be 20% less than that in fiscal year 2020. Generally, the estimated shortfall in total revenue for next fiscal year is estimated around $5 billion mark. And that's by the majority of the experts. The state currently has roughly $3.5 billion in rainy day funds, an amount that even if we're all used would only cover 70% of this shortfall for only 1 year. This is relevant to our local government because the city relies on state aid each year to help fund its budget. In fact, roughly 12% of the city's total revenue comes from state aid. We most certainly must expect reductions in these state aid funding levels over the next few fiscal years. History shows that each of the last two recessions, the city has had to absorb over a 20% reduction in this funding stream, phased in over 3 fiscal years. In both recessions, first year that reductions were made, the city had to absorb a 15% reduction in local aid. The following years also saw continued reductions, and it wasn't until year 4 that funding levels began to rise again. We must be prepared for a similar situation. Similarly, we can look to history to understand what we must be prepared for related to a number of our other economically tied revenue streams. In total, including state aid, about 18% of the city's general fund revenue comes from areas that will be affected by the economic slowdown. each area having a different level of volatility, anywhere from 15% reductions to 50% reductions in revenue are what history is telling us to prepare for in these various revenue streams. Most certainly the coming year, fiscal 21, that budget will be less revenue in many areas and increasing costs in other areas. Yes, increasing costs, but there's an important distinction between costs that we have discretion and cost increases we must pay due to prior contractual or legal obligations. We still need to meet our obligations regarding employee contracts, pension system obligations, healthcare costs, and frankly, continuing to deliver services to our community. Therefore, we must be restrained in spending in those areas where we have some discretion over. As difficult as the FY21 budget will prove to be, FY22 will be even more of a challenge, and we must keep that in mind when we're building FY21's budget. FY22 is the year we will begin our debt payments associated with the building of the new police station, the final borrowing for the middle school, as well as the renegotiation of our waste and recycling contracts. In total, at this point, we're projecting a $5 million year-over-year cost increase between FY21 and FY22. That, in an environment of shrinking revenues, is the challenge we're all facing. Unfortunately, even as the economy begins to rebound, there will be delayed effect to the revenues the city can expect. As a result, we must manage through 3 to 4 fiscal years of reduced revenue if we are to be successful. So the good news is, and there is some good news, the city has been smart in our collective financial management. We have resisted the urge to grow spending levels beyond sustainable levels despite some pressures to do so, and we have built reserves that will help us through the difficult paths ahead. However, those reserves alone will not be sufficient to get us through to the other side, especially if we use those reserves to prop up spending levels in areas where we have discretion and should be making reductions. Rather, the city reserves should be used cautiously and in conjunction with spending reductions in the areas where they are possible. We also must be mindful of the spending we do commit to. The city still has needs in terms of capital investment and infrastructure that cannot fall behind during this time. The city still must transfer some of its funds into the police station project as planned and must figure a path forward to the purchase of a new fire truck to replace the 24-year-old ladder we currently have. Undoubtedly, there will also be needs that are currently unforeseen, and we need to preserve the city's ability to address them as they arise. This will likely result in all of the department budgets being impacted. In a typical year, the administration would be deep in the budget development process to be able to submit a proposed budget by June 1st to the City Council. This would typically allow the City Council to deliberate and act prior to the start of the fiscal year on July 1. This is not a typical year, and so much of the budget plan depends on state aid levels that we must wait and see what the legislature and governor decide on regarding state aid levels. Rest assured that the administration under the mayor's leadership is preparing multiple budget variations in anticipation of those state aid figures and will submit a proposed budget as soon as it can responsibly do so. The administration has also begun the process of developing a 1/12 budget, which is effectively the ability of the city to spend money through the month of July when a full fiscal year budget has not been enacted by July 1st. This will be necessary if state aid figures are not released with enough time for the mayor to submit a budget and the city council to act by the statutory deadline of June 30th. Lastly, I wanted to address the importance of strong financial decisions through this time. Standard & Poor's as well as Moody's are the rating agencies that municipalities look to set their bond ratings and effectively the interest rates that the cities and towns will pay on their debt. They're currently downgrading many governmental bond ratings. There are aspects of these ratings we cannot control and some of which we can control. The city's bond rating needs to remain in the forefront of everyone's mind as it has a direct relationship to how much we pay in interest costs. Money that, if not spent on interest, could go to services or infrastructure costs for our residents. With over $100 million in debt, a 0.25% interest rate translates to millions in interest expenses over the life of that debt. We need to do everything we can to keep our bond rating strong in this environment. Reserve positions, budget performance, debt ratios, and pension system liability are all areas that rating agencies consider most important. We must keep those things in mind when we are making decisions because the level of services we are able to deliver our residents are directly related. There still remains a lot of unknowns at this point, and as we learn more information, we'll be updating our forecasts, making recommendations, and doing everything possible to prepare the city for the worst while we hope for the best. Thankfully, we have great leadership in our community at this time when our residents need it. I have tremendous confidence in you, our smart and dedicated city council, that frankly will be asked to make some difficult decisions. And we're fortunate to have such a focused and competent mayor in Mayor Cahill. Collectively, we'll get through this and eventually we'll get back to some level of normalcy. So I thank you very much for your time this evening, and hopefully we can have some more discussion about this as we go.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rails, and I know you'll keep us updated as time goes on. Starting next month, we'll go back to our regular city council meetings scheduled for the first and the third Mondays of the month. So we'll meet again May 4th in case you have anything else to update us on. Thank you. It is 7:15 and now we have a public hearing on order number 78. Ms. Kent, could you please read that order?
Order number 78, order that the City Council of the City of Beverly hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27th at 7:15 p.m. remote on Google Meet live stream on BevCam relative to the mayor's request for transfer up to $195,000 from city reserve for unforeseen account into the Building Inspections Department to pay for the cost for property at 11 Charles Street.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. Mr. Rails, you want to introduce this one?
Sure, and I'll be brief. I know I made some late just a minute ago, but this particular order is a request to transfer $190 to demolish and secure the property located at 11 Charles Street. We are then able to place a lien on the property, so the city ultimately at some point would be made whole by its investment. And so these funds are available in the unforeseen line, and we've obtained 3 bids on the work, and the low bid is around $130,000 to $140,000, which I understand is significantly lower than the request. However, there are many unforeseens in this type of work. We don't know what is in the basement. We don't know if there's any hazardous material that need to be removed. So we need to make sure we have significant contingency in the event that there are some cost overruns. I will also say that if any of these monies go unspent in this environment, we will be restricting spending. So it's not as if that would be spent anywhere else. It would go unspent and fall to free cash at the end of the fiscal year.
Thanks, Mr. Rails. Do any members of the city council have any questions for Mr. Rails? We'll go to Councilor Ames.
Thanks for bringing this to us, Mr. Rails. I appreciate it. This property is in Ward 3. It's in tough shape, and it definitely needs to come down. It's in a dense area, and it's a major fire hazard there, you know, on top of all the other hazards involved. So I'm happy that the city is moving this forward. Do you have a time? Do you have an idea of how long it will take for this work to happen?
The low bid is still working its way through the contract phase, so we don't have a signed contract yet, Councilor Ames. However, we are anxious to get this work done, as we agree with you. It is not only an eyesore, but is a safety issue. So we'll be working expeditiously to get this done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the city council wish to ask a question or make a comment? Hearing no questions or comments, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? Brian Ells has left the meeting. Hearing no further questions or comments, I will close our public hearing and then refer to the council for a roll call vote. Ms. Kent?
Ames,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Flowers,
Yes.
Frady's,
Yes.
Houseman,
Yes.
Rand,
Yes.
Rotundo, Guanxi.
Yes, but before our budget analyst, Jerry Perry, I forgot that he was with us. I'm sorry. Mr. Perry? Mr. Perry, turn yourself on.
Mr. President, thank you. I'll be
Thank
very
you.
brief, if you can hear me. The mayor did request this on March 5th to augment what Mr. Ailes just stated. The three bids that came in for, the high one was 315,000, the middle one was 278,000, and the low one is at $135,000. So that's how the bids are coming in. There was some question whether the low bidder could actually get it done, but in discussions with the administration today, they have belief that the low bidder can do it. So hopefully that will work out there. There is exactly $195,000 in the reserve for unforeseen accounts, so we can afford it. The finance director has assured me, consistent with what the administration is attempting to do to turn back money, that they will not spend the entire 195 in the event, they only need the 135 for the bid, but there are concerns about hazardous waste there and asbestos issues. So that's a concern. I agree with Councilor Raines. I personally did visit the property about a month ago. To me, it's a public safety issue. Mr. President, as your budget analyst, I would recommend that you approve the request.
Thank you. And I think that we just had 9 councils approve on it, so I will say motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Perry. Let's move on to our, Ms. Kent, are you ready?
Yep.
Let's move on to our next public hearing. It's National Grid on order number 80. Could you please read that order, and then we'll hear from Mr. Matthew Farron from National Grid.
Order number 80, City of Beverly ordered that the City Council of the City of Beverly hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. Remote meeting live stream on BevCam relative to the petition for National Grid and Verizon. Plan 287-43112 National Grid McPherson Drive.
Thank you. Mr. Farron, thank you for joining us today remotely. Tell us what you'd like us to approve.
So I'm petitioning to install one jointly owned inline pole, which is going to be necessary to provide service for the planned solar work that's going to be going on at Innocenti Park.
Simple and straightforward. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And the work hasn't been, I always like to ask this, Matthew, is that the work hasn't been done yet, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Councilor Houseman has a question. Councilor Houseman?
Yes, just a simple question. This will be a new pole, or will freestanding, or will this be a new pole attached to an existing pole? In other words, creating a double pole situation.
No, sir. This is going to be a brand new pole. There will be no double pole.
Okay, thank you. That was the only question I have.
And in the past, Councilor Houseman has worked very hard to make sure that double poles were eliminated and no new ones sprung up. Thank you, Mr. Farron. Anybody else? Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this one? Hearing no questions or comments, I will close this public hearing, and I will ask Ms. Kent to call for a roll call vote.
James,
Yes.
Feldman, Flaherty,
Yes.
Flowers,
Yes.
Frady's,
Yes.
Houseman,
Yes.
Rand,
Yes.
Rotundo,
Yes.
Guanxi.
Yes, and that carries 9-0. Thank you, Matthew. Let's move on to our next public hearing on order number 81, which is also National Grid. Ms. Kent, can you read that?
Legal notice, order number 81, order that the City Council of the City of Beverly hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27th, 2020 at 7:35 p.m. Remote on Google Meet, live stream on BevCam relative to the petition from National Grid and Verizon, plan number 29361213 for Balt Street.
Mr. Farron, you have the floor again.
Thank you. So for this one, I'm petitioning to install two jointly owned inline poles
Again, these are going to be new installs, no double poles here. And these poles are going to be for line voltage monitoring equipment. It's part of our new grid modernization program to improve electric service reliability. These 2 poles are going to be set right in front of our substation.
Thank you, Mr. Harron. Any questions or comments from members of the city council? Or how about members of the public? Hearing no questions or comments, I'll close this public hearing. Ask Ms. Kent for a roll call.
Ames? Ames?
Yes.
Feldman?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Frady's?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanxi.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Farron, for joining us. That passed 9-0. We look forward to seeing you again before the city council. Hopefully
Thank
live
you very
next
much.
time.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
also. So we're getting surprisingly, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves right now. So Ms. Kent, our next public hearing is scheduled for 7:40. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take a whack at some of our other agenda items.
Sure.
I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes of our previous Google Meet meeting, which was held on Monday, April 13th, 2020.
So
So
moved.
moved.
So moved. Second. Second.
All those in favor, roll call.
Ames?
Everyone's laughing at
Yes.
me.
Feldman?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Frady's?
Yes.
Houseman? Houseman? Rand?
Houseman, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rotundo?
Yes.
Guanxi?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Kent. Minutes are approved, as painful as it was. Let's go to communications from His Honor the Mayor. I would entertain a motion to accept the late file from His Honor Mayor Cahill on order number 104.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ames? Ames?
Yes.
Feldman?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Frady's?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
Guanxi?
Yes. Ms. Kent, could you please read that order?
Order number 104. Dear Honorable City Council, I respectfully request that you approve a loan authorization in the amount of $1.4 million that will increase the authorization for the ongoing water main work in and around downtown area. The project was initially authorized by a $2.3 million loan order. We are seeking to add to that as the project scopes has proven to be more complicated than originally expected. The project involves cleaning, inspecting, and relining of existing water mains, as well as laying additional new mains to create redundancy and system enhancements. With the age of some infrastructure pushing 100 years, 100 years old, the need to replace sections and add valves and gates was far greater than anticipated. Complications related to old trolley tracks and cobblestones add costs unexpectedly, as some of the city's older records were not as thorough as today's standard required. The totality of this project is a water system related and therefore will be fully funded through the Water Enterprise Fund. I have attached suggested order language for your review and consideration. The order must be published at least 10 days prior to final passage, should be referred to the Committee on Finance and Property for a report thereon and required a public hearing. With the other authorization, the issuance of bonds, it will require a 2/3 favorable vote of all members of the City Council. Please initiate action on this matter at your next City Council meeting, April 27th, 2020. Thank you. Sincerely yours, Michael P. Cahill, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. I would entertain a motion to set that public hearing for Monday, May 18th, 2020 at 7:15 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Ms. Kent, roll call.
Ames?
Yes.
Feldman? Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Frady's?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanxi.
Yes. And that is all we have for Mayor Cahill this evening. Let's go to communications from other city offices and boards.
Order number 99 from the council president to re-elect clerk of committees.
I would entertain a motion to hold that until our next meeting on May 4th.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ames?
Yes.
Feldman? Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Frady's?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanxi.
Yes.
Order number 100 from the finance director, Brian Ailes, for prior year invoices.
Mr. Ailes, do you want to make a comment on that? It seems pretty standard.
Pretty standard. Occasionally throughout the year, we get some invoices that either were unaccounted for at the closeout of last fiscal year. The two you have before you this evening are relatively minor. I believe one's through the clerk's department. The other one is with the school department.
Thank you, Mr. Ailes. Any questions from members of the council? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve that request.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Ms. Kent?
Ames?
Yes.
Feldman?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Frady's?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanxi.
Yes. I would entertain a motion to accept the late file for order number 103 from the Community Preservation Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ames?
Yes.
Feldman? Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Frady's?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
Guanxi.
Yes. Ms. Kent?
Order 103, the Community Preservation Committee for the 7th round funding.
I would entertain a motion to set a public hearing for that for Monday, May 18th, 2020 at 7:30.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, Ms. Kent?
Ames?
Yes.
Feldman? Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Frady's?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanxi.
Yes. Thank you all. Before I move on to communications and applications and petitions, I got a message from somebody that says BevCam is having trouble with sound.
Yes.
That was 7 minutes ago. Are we back on? Or are we still working on that?
This is Lisa. I got a message from a couple people watching. And Aladdin staff told me, so I emailed BevCam. I'm not sure if they got it or not. That's why
Yeah.
I wanted to text you so you can announce it.
Okay,
They didn't have a volume, I guess.
so we are working on it.
I think so.
Okay.
They know.
Communications, applications, and petitions.
Order number 101, application for pawnbroker's license for the Nyan Group, Inc. Cash
And
point, also the name.
Ms. Kent, let me know that this has been vetted by the police department and his detective staff, so I would entertain a motion to approve that request application.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ames?
Yes.
Feldman?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Frady's?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanxi.
Yes. I would entertain a motion to approve, to accept the late file on order number 102.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ames?
Yes.
Feldman?
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Flowers,
Yes.
Brady,
Yes.
Houseman,
Yes.
Rand,
Yes.
Rotundo,
Yes.
and Guanci.
Yes. And Ms. Kent, what is that?
They are saying that BevCam does not have video either.
Oh, okay.
Who it's from a number that I don't recognize.
Okay, you'll check in with BevCam on that.
Yep.
And that is that late file is from Dewberry Engineers, Inc. It's the Cumming Center flood mitigation plan measures, and I would entertain a motion to receive that and place it on file.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Ms. Kent.
Ames,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Flowers,
Yes.
Brady's,
Yes.
Houseman,
Yes.
Rand,
Yes.
Rotundo,
Yes.
and Guanci.
Yes. Let's take care of motions and orders.
Oh, not ready for that one. Hold
Okay. Should we go back?
on. Yeah.
All right, so we'll move right on to our public hearing. It is 7:40. Our next public hearing is on number 96. Ms. Kent, could you please read that order?
96. Okay, so order number 96, that the City Council of the City of Beverly hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27, 2020, at 7:40 p.m., remote on Google Meet live stream on BevCam relative to the mayor's request for a transfer of $16,464 from the reserve for union negotiations.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. And it is a financial matter, so I'll go to Mr. Ailes, our finance director.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm also here. I know the mayor's on the line, as well as our city solicitor has some representation as well if there are any questions that pop up. But effectively, this is a request to transfer some funds and cover some costs related to a side letter agreement with the AFSCME custodial group that was recently signed about a month ago between the two groups. The actual compensation that this would go towards is a $600 payment per member, prorated for part-time members. And in exchange, they've agreed to exclude the Director of Public School Division, as well as the facilities engineer positions from that union. And this is similar to the other union collective bargaining agreements that we recently came to agreement with other unions.
Thank you. Our solicitor is here, Ms. Williams or Mayor Cahill. Do you have any comments to make on this one?
Mr. President, thank you. Only if you have questions.
Okay. Any questions from members of the City Council? Sure. Councilor Ames?
Thank you, Councilor Gonski, President Guanci. I'm just happy that this money is moving forward and, you know, that the custodians will be paid. So that is good. And, you know, it's a good thing to honor what we say.
Good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilor Ames. Councilor Houseman?
Yes, I'd just like to ask if our budget analyst has any comment on this or not.
Sure. Mr. Perry?
Thank you, Councilor Houseman. Yeah, very quickly, the request is for $16,464. In the account that they're requesting to transfer, there is $36,158. So there are sufficient funds in there to handle the transfer request, where it's collective bargaining and a prior agreement. And the fact there are sufficient funds, it would be my recommendation to approve the transfer.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Councilor Houseman, you're good with that?
I am, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the council wish to make a comment or ask a question? Then I'll open it up to members of the public. Is there a member of the public listening in or watching that would like to make a comment?
Yes, Mr. Guanci, Jerry Cahill, how are you tonight?
Jerry, name and address.
12 Lenox Street, Beverly, Massachusetts. I'm
Thank
the
you, Ms.
president.
Cahill.
I'm the president of AFSCME Local 2894, And I'm here on behalf of the custodians tonight because we did enter into this agreement on February the 12th with a target date of checks being issued on March the 31st. I guess that was the first target date, and then we had to wait for approval from the city council. Given the current economic times, I know that it's tough for the city as well, but we have approximately 26 custodians that are sort of banking on this money to come in to be able to make ends meet in their current financial situations. So I appreciate approving the funds and taking care of our responsibilities to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cahill. Always good to hear from you. Anybody else from the public wish to make a comment? All right, hearing no further questions or comments, I'll close our public hearing and I will ask our city clerk, Lisa Kent, to do a roll call vote, please.
Ames,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Flowers,
Yes.
Brady's,
Yes.
Houseman,
Yes.
Rand,
Yes.
Rotundo,
Yes.
and Guanci.
Yes. Ms. Kent, how does your pile of work look?
Do you want me to do this order 77, the final passage, or do you want
Sure.
to next?
Motions and orders.
Okay. Order number 77, ordered be obtained by the City Council and the City of Beverly as follows. In the year 2020, an ordinance amending an ordinance entitled Chapter 270 Vehicles and Traffic, amending Chapter 270 Vehicles and Traffic, Section 25B, stop intersections by removing the following street segments. On Bald Street, direction of travel west and intersection of McKay Street, amending Chapter 270 Vehicles and Traffic, Section 33B, obedience to specific traffic control devices by adding the following street segments. Name of street, direction of travel at intersection of Bald Street, westbound, and McKay Street. Amending Chapter 270 Vehicle and Traffic, Section 33 GI, obedience to specific traffic control devices by adding the following street segments. Name of street, direction of travel, an intersection of Talbot Street, northbound, Boto Lane, McKay Street, southbound, Bald Street. First reading was Monday, March 9th, 2020. Second reading was March 23rd, 2020. And the ordinance to take effect upon publication and final passage tonight on April 27th.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. Any questions or comments? Hearing no questions or comments, question comes on the acceptance of the proposal and the adoption of the ordinance. Ms. Kent, could you please do a roll call vote for us?
Ames,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Flowers,
Yes.
Brady's,
Yes.
Houseman,
Yes.
Rand,
Yes.
Rotundo,
Yes.
and Guanci.
Yes. Ms. Kent, how do we, what do we have coming out of committees that we can vote on this evening? Do you have that information ready to go?
I do.
Why don't we still have another 10 minutes before our next scheduled public hearing.
Okay.
So I would like to do reports from committees, if we could.
Okay, order number 73. And that was proposed amendment to Article 15-24 contributed retirement board of the city ordinance. That was out of, legal affairs.
Let's just hold that one for right now.
Okay, should we take a vote on that or no?
No, just hold it.
Okay,
What else do we have?
we have communication from the city clerk, an application for sandwich board sign for FKM Branch Corp., 1112 Rantoul Street.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve that request. Ms. Kent, could you please call a roll?
Ames?
Yes. Could I just make one comment?
Of course.
There's like 5 to 10 pieces of paper to get a sandwich board, and I would respectfully ask as a small business person that maybe perhaps that the process might be a little streamlined, just to be respectful of the time and perhaps even the professionals that it might take to put this together. It just seemed like a lot of work for a sandwich board, but thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Ms. Kent?
I think Council Flowers wanted to speak.
Oh, okay, me. Okay, Council Flowers.
Thank you. I was just going to say, Mr. President, if I'm not incorrect, that I think that it's the sandwich board is an ordinance, so there could be an amendment made to an ordinance by any counselor who might be interested. I think that is not inaccurate to say. Is that true?
No, I think you're right on target. And that ordinance was changed a number of years ago that made it, I don't want to say, made it more difficult to get approval for a sandwich board sign. So maybe we could work on it to make it a little more efficient.
I would agree with that.
And
Thank you, Mr. President.
And I think Council Flowers, you would be the right person to do that. With assistance
great.
from Councilor Ames.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Council Flaherty?
I just wanted to second that.
Thank you. That you want to work on the ordinance also, or that it needs to be streamlined?
That it needs to be streamlined.
Okay. Councilor Rand?
Thank you. I'm also in full support of that being streamlined. Before Aaron Clausen left the city, I'd had a couple conversations with him and actually Darlene to talk about how that whole process could actually be taken out of the city council's kind of purview. Just another thought that the planning department may want to share in the fun of preparing some new details for that ordinance.
I think that would be great. Okay, anybody else? So we started our roll call vote with Ames, and she said yes. Ms. Kent?
Yep. Ames? Feldman?
Yeah.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Brady?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanci.
Yes.
Oh, shoot.
What do we have next, Ms. Kent?
I just hit the wrong button, and Richard Pierce, I didn't allow him in the meeting, so come, try again, Richard. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. So we have order number 97. Communication from the mayor for the appointment of Director of Planning and Development, Ms. Darlene Nguyen.
We haven't considered it yet. I would entertain a motion to approve Mayor Cahill's request.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Second, great. Roll call vote, Ms. Kent.
I think Council Flaherty said he wanted to speak.
Wanted to what? Speak? No, that was on the last. Oh, you do? I'm sorry, Council Flaherty.
Yes, I just wanted to talk about this with Darlene Nguyen. I think she's a very well qualified candidate. The question I have is the amount of money that she's being hired for is replacing Aaron. That it's the same price. I'm just concerned about these times, how it's not, it wasn't advertised, I don't believe. It was basically put out there, even though she's qualified to do so. It's just kind of concerning, kind of what our finance director talked about: free cash, new growth, lower state aid, at over $100,000. I just don't know if it should be an interim until we get through our budget season and go into the fall. And then we can kind of go ahead. It's just like we're going to be laying off people. It's just a challenging time. I'm not too sure this is the right time. And again, it's not about her qualifications, whether she can do the job. I just don't know if it's the right timing.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? Members of the council? Mayor Cahill, do you wish to make a comment? Ms. Nguyen will be your department head.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to say, Councilor Flaherty, I appreciate all the concerns that we all share about the budget. Absolutely. I would say this: Mr. Chair, the HR director, at my request, did a updated survey of comparable salaries for planning directors, both in our region and then outside region with several like communities. And I would say that the salary that we are offering Wynn is right in the wheelhouse of that. She also brought significant private sector planning experience to the job before coming here, and she's been with us about 5 years. And we thought it was the most appropriate and really the only way to honor her experience, her professionalism, her talents, and to make sure that she was in line with her peers in other communities. I will also say that the job was posted as legally required. And, you know, I think we can all appreciate when you have the right person in-house, that's where you end up going. When you need to go outside for what the position requires and demands, then that's where you go. And we're extremely confident in Ms. Wynn's abilities to do this job. She's done a great job for us, as I said, for 5+ years as our assistant planner. She also is, in addition to having all the ability in the world, she also has a lot of institutional knowledge that we know will be of value. Is already proving to be of value and will going forward. So again, I appreciate the concerns around where we are financially. I just want to make sure I shared those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Councilor Ames.
Thanks for the explanation, Your Honor. I was just curious about the makeup of the planning department and if you were intending to hire to your previous capacity, or if they were looking at, if you're looking at trimming in that department.
Mr. President?
Yes, Your Honor, please.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Councilor Ames. You know, when we look at the workload that's in the planning department, I don't want to have to leave that position vacant. I will say that we have made the decision that we won't fill the position during this final quarter of FY20. Beyond that, I'm not sure. And as I said, we don't want to leave it vacant because the work's there. It's important. These are some of the conversations we'll be having together because, there's a generation of revenue for the city that comes from the ability of the planning department to do their work and respond to applications and move things forward. So, there's always an opportunity cost if you don't fill certain positions. But we are mindful, obviously, of where we are and the fact that there are so many unknowns to where we're going financially. So as I said, it being late April, there are no plans to fill the position, within this final quarter. And as we bring our proposed budget forward to you folks, we'll have made some decisions on our end as to what we think is needed. And so we can have that conversation then. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Council Flaherty.
Yes, yes, Your Honor. I understand. I don't question her ability. I think she's very well qualified. It's just in these economic times, I'm just concerned moving forward, and whether other department heads that might be leaving or we have to hire. I'm just concerned with hiring anybody for the next quarter. I think that kind of helps. Again, it's not her ability and that. It's just that I'm just concerned about how it looks far in the public on this position and going from a $60,000. I do appreciate you holding off on the hiring, at least for the final quarter.
Your Honor, all good?
Yeah, no, thank you. I very much appreciate that, councilors.
All right. So we need to take a roll call vote. Ms. Kent?
Ames?
Yes.
Feldman? Yeah. Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Brady?
Yes.
Hausman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanci.
Yes, and Ms. Wynn, if you're with us, best of luck in your new position, and the members of the City Council are here to help. It is 7:55. We'll move on to our next public hearing on order number 91. Ms. Kent, could you please read that order?
Order number 91, that the City Council of the City of Beverly hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27th, 2020 at 7:55 PM. Remote on Google Meet live stream on BevCam relative to the mayor's request for transfer of $100,000 to fund work associated with the testing and monitoring of property at the airport.
And Brian Ailes is here. Mr. Ailes.
Thank you once again, Mr. President. So this evening, I'll just go over really quick the logistics, and then we can get into any questions around the project that you may have. We have some experts on the line, as well as Gloria Bouillon, who is also here, and the mayor, of course. Effectively, the $100,000 transfer would come, what we're requesting, we're asking for it to come from the fund balance of the Airport Enterprise Fund. So this is outside of the city's general fund, in a standalone enterprise fund. That $100,000 would then be transferred to a project fund, which would allow us to charge costs associated with this project to it over multiple fiscal years if necessary. So that's kind of the mechanics behind it. The project itself, as the correspondence notes, relates to the ongoing monitoring of some contaminants that are in the soil that our expert will get into a little bit more. And so I'm anxious to see if you have any questions about it.
Okay. And our expert is?
His name is Jacob Butterworth with Sage
Jacob
Environmental.
Butterworth. I guessed right. Mr. Butterworth, how are you tonight?
Well, how are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to add? Or are you just here for some questions?
Mr. President,
I think
Jacob, could you let us know who you are? Jacob's our licensed site professional who we retain on a number of environmental issues. So, sorry, go ahead, Jacob, please.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Sure, thank you. So again, my name is Jacob Butterworth. I'm with Sage Environmental. I'm a Massachusetts licensed site professional. I assist the city on a number of environmental projects. And I'm really here to basically support any questions that might arise from the conversations and fill everyone in on what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. And Gloria Bouillon is here, our airport manager. Ms. Bouillon, do you have anything to add before we go to questions?
I do. I can give you a little bit of a background here as to what the funds are used for. Essentially, we're transferring the $100,000, as Brian had said, to pay past invoices as well as to pay a few upcoming invoices, and we're putting it into a separate account so we can track it within our system. And I have just a little bit of background as to environmental and what they've been conducting. So they have been assessing the release of petroleum to the soil and groundwater in the vicinity of a fueling station on airport property. In February of 2020, Sage filed with the Mass DEP a Massachusetts contingency plan, phase 2 comprehensive site assessment relative to that release. The phase 2 CSA notes in the conclusion of the nature of extents of the petroleum release that have been defined. A method 1 human health and environmental risk characterization was conducted to evaluate the risk posed by the petroleum related impacts, the results of which concluded for that current conditions, soils present no significant risk. The risk associated with groundwater at this time cannot support a conclusion of no significant risk on the basis of comparing petroleum constituents in groundwater to method 1 GW1 groundwater standard. Please note that petroleum impacts to the groundwater have been defined and are limited. Additionally, the groundwater within the area of the petroleum impact is not currently used for drinking water. The City of Beverly maintains a water supply protection overlay district upon the area, including the area impacted by the petroleum release, and as such, under the plan, the method 1 GW1 groundwater standard applies. Furthermore, relative to the petroleum release, a conclusion of no significant risk was determined for public safety, welfare, and the environment. During the assessment of this petroleum release, Mass DEP requested that monitoring wells located within this area of the petroleum impact be tested and sampled for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, also known as PFAS, due to one training event that was held in 2009 in which firefighting foam which is also called AFFF, aqueous film forming foam, was used on the airport property. As such, sampling and select wells were performed for PFAS, and the results did show detectable levels in excess of the Mass GW1 reporting concentrations, which were promulgated by the Mass DP in 2019. Mass DP concentrations for the GW1 standard is 20 nanograms per liter, or parts per trillion, and is based upon 6 specific PFAS compounds, which Jacob Butterworth can go into more detail if need be. The findings of the PFAS in the groundwater were applicable reporting concentrations that were reported to Mass DEP in January 2020. In March, just this past month, 2020, an additional round of groundwater sampling for the PFAS analysis was conducted using monitoring wells within the petroleum release area. The results showed varying levels of PFAS relative to the original sampling, which detected ranging between 23 and 53 nanograms per liter. In comparison to the previous concentrations, PFAS levels appear to have decreased during the first sampling event. Therefore, we will be using these funds to pay invoices and the scope of work tasks.
Thank you, Ms. Bullion. Councilor Feldman has a question.
Yes, thank you, President Gonti. I was wondering, when I've been speaking with some of my constituents along 97 near the airport, this was a concern in terms of, I think one person referred to it as flyover ash in the groundwater. I'm not sure if that's the ash in the groundwater is one of the things that somebody brought up. I'm not an engineer, and I'm not sure what that is, but he was asking about the contaminants of the groundwater. And my question, I guess, is what is the scope of where you're testing at the airport? Will it just be on the airport property, or will there be any extension into the surrounding neighborhood?
I can speak to the airport property alone. The scope of work only covers the airport property.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Houseman.
Yes, I guess this is a question for Mr. Butterworth. Actually, a series of questions, I guess. So, if I understood correctly from what Ms. Bullion read, there are 2 contaminants being sampled, and maybe I got that wrong, so if you'd clarify. One is petroleum, and one is PFAS. So, before going any further, Mr. Bullion, are there 2, or is it just one or the other? And if only one of those 2, which one is it?
So this is Jacob. Yep. So the original investigation that we were conducting was for a known petroleum release in the area of the fueling station. During that assessment, Mass DEP had reached out to the city and myself, asking that we sample a few select wells within that area for the PFAS compounds, because they had historical documentation of a fire training event that happened at the airport. So the main focus of the initial assessment was the petroleum, but in doing that sampling and being asked by DEP, we did recognize that there are some PFAS detections in the groundwater. So they are 2 separate things.
Okay. And your work will address both contaminants, is that correct?
Yes, as of right now, we've defined the extent of the petroleum release, so we have a really good handle on that. Right now, the additional work that we're looking to do is really focused upon getting our arms wrapped around the PFAS extents at this time.
And has the geographic scope of the PFAS contamination been delineated, been defined?
That's the intent of this next round of sampling and investigation.
Okay. And the airport is located above and near Beverly's water supply, correct?
It's located near a Zone A, which eventually discharges to the Wenham Lake.
Right. And if I understood what Ms. Bullion said, there are levels of PFAS that exceed EPA contamination level thresholds. Is that correct?
Not EPA. We do have so this is kind of the thing with the whole PFAS arena right now relative to environmental. EPA has a standard of 70 parts per trillion, and Mass DEP decided to make that number 20. So the last round of sampling that we did in March didn't have anything above the 70, which is what EPA expects, but we do have exceedances of the 20 parts per trillion that DEP regulates.
And isn't it fair to say that there is a great deal of concern around PFAS as a relatively newly identified contaminant, the science around which in terms of appropriate thresholds is still being worked out? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And PFAS are materials which are of very great concern in terms of its impact on human health?
That is correct.
Okay. And the scope of work that the city is hiring you to do will be in its initial phase simply to define delineate the geographic scope, the level of concentrations, and not address the remediation of it? Or does it also include actual remediation as opposed to sort of a plan for that could be used for remediation?
The real intent is to delineate the extent of that, but we will obviously offer, based upon that information, a plan of action that may be applicable to solve the problem.
Okay.
But it will not include remediation at this time, no.
Okay. All right. So I guess my comment is this is an extremely serious and important project to be funded. PFAS contaminations have become sort of more relatively on the radar of environmental regulatory agencies. They have a definite adverse effect on human health, and so it's important that this work be done as a first step towards getting our arms around what we need to do to correct this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Houseman.
And
Mayor Kay, Gloria, did you want to follow up on that?
I do. So I just want to make a comment, just as far as what we are categorized as an airport as compared to some airports that use this foam, which is the AFFF. So there is evidence that it was used in one event, whereas since we are a general aviation airport and we are not a commercial service airport, which is regulated under FAR 139 regulation, which aqueous foam, the foam is actually required to be on the airport. They have to test for it, they have to sample for it, and they use it constantly, spraying for it during incidents and then training events. The fact that we have evidence of it being used once in 2009, and the fact that we are also not distinguished as a commercial service, airline service airport, really puts us in a better situation as far as being able to identify exactly where it was, the very low risk because it was one event, as opposed to multiple days, multiple years, and consistent usage of this. So therefore, since we are a general aviation airport and not required to store and hold this foam, we are, we're in a much better position than many other airports.
If I may follow up on that, Mr. President?
Please.
Yeah, so Gloria, just to be clear, the airport no longer uses and has no plan and has no intention of using in the future any materials that contain PFAS?
That is affirmative. Yep. So any type of foam, I know that there's already another modification to the foam that if it is to be used at airport, which we don't have use for, there is another foam that is used if we have to do fire suppression.
And that foam does not contain PFAS.
That is affirmative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Cahill.
Thanks, Mr. President. If I could, I just want to ask Ms. Bouillon to give us just a little more clarity on exactly where on the runway, where on the site we're talking, and then maybe Mr. Butterworth can give us a little more detail, Jacob, if you would, on the strategy for placement for the the additional wells and what you're hoping to do by doing that. I know we talked about your hope that you put them where you put them, and it'll help you to kind of put a circle around things if the results come out as we hope. But first, Ms. Bouillon, and then Mr. Butterworth, please.
Sure. So the where the petroleum release was, and where the first samples of wells were located, is in an area that is on the Beverly side of the airport. So it's also known as the east side of the airport, where the administration building is, and currently in an area in which is called an aircraft apron ramp. So aircraft taxi. We have tie downs, so it's a movement area on the airport. So the samples were taken from that area where there is currently a fueling station. And then that was the second round of samplings, in which I had discussed earlier, as well as Jacob had mentioned that the second round of samplings had shown a decrease in the levels. The other area in which we have, so that area is where 2 contaminants were found. The other area in which the training event was held is actually on the Danvers side of the airport, on an unused pavement area. It's a very small area in which they actually put a car on fire and then sprayed foam on the car. They suppressed the fire with foam, and it was a training event in 2009 in which mutual aid worked together to use this foam. And at the time, this was the recommended foam used across the nation for all airports. But like I said, for us, it was known that it was used once, and then it was also contaminated and found with the petroleum release sampling. And I should just clarify, where they did the training event is almost essentially kind of in the middle of the airport, on a small area of pavement. So yeah, like I said, if you're looking at the airport from a bird's eye view, it's somewhat in the middle of the airport.
All good? Council Flowers, you've been patient.
Well, Mr. President, I thought Jacob was going to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Butterworth, would you follow up?
Sure, absolutely. So to expand on what Gloria was saying, our intent in this next round of sampling is to obviously put some sampling points in the area where that fire training was documented to have occurred. That's an obvious location that we want to check the box for. But outside of that, our intent is to delineate the down gradient extent of the contamination heading towards beyond basically where former hangar was in a easterly direction. So we're going to put some additional monitoring wells in down gradient of that. We're also looking to capitalize on some other existing monitoring wells that are probably still existing on the property and down gradient that were associated with other releases that were closed out with DEP. So we're trying to maximize available resources to get the sampling that we need. We're also looking, depending upon those monitoring well results, to sample within a stream, which eventually leads its way towards Wenham Lake, which is the source of that Zone A boundary. So really, the intent of this is to we know that we have it, but we really want to understand, is it getting much further beyond where we are now? Because the ultimate risk from PFAS is drinking water. Actually consuming it. It's not a volatile compound. We don't exceed any ecological standards. It's really just getting our arms wrapped around the down gradient edge.
Thank you, sir. Let's go to Council Flowers.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I really just wanted to echo some of what Councillor Houseman had said earlier. This is question that I've had constituents approach me about since last term that I was serving, not just about the airport, but about their concerns about PFAS and trying to understand better if they might be making their way into our water supply, and if so, in what quantity. Partially, I think, because there's been more learning about them, as Councillor House was saying, but also because it's a compound that, Mr. Butterworth, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the concerns, is this correct, about PFAS is they don't easily break down either in the environment or in the human body. So once they get into the water, as you were saying, they can easily get into our bodies. But from what I've read, something like 98% of the US population has PFAS detectable in our bloodstream. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, everyone on this call has some PFAS in their system, for sure. It's in everything. I mean, one of the things that I think is valuable to understand here is we talk about the firefighting foam, which gets a bad rap because it's one of the more notariable products that uses it, but it's in everything. It's in all your waterproofing. It's in popcorn bags. It's in pens, paper. It's all your nonstick cookware. You go to Dunkin' Donuts and get a bagel sandwich, it's on the wrapper. It's on everything. So everyone on this call has some level of PFAS in their system for sure.
Thank you. So I guess I would just absolutely affirm that this seems like important work for us to undertake, and the more aggressive we can be as a community to measure this in our groundwater, not just
Councillor Flowers, somebody just mute you?
someone did, but I unmuted myself.
But you're back. You
I'm back.
unmuted yourself. Good.
Oh, thank you. I was just saying that I think particularly as we learn more about this and we see that the EPA and Mass DEP there's differing levels of what's considered acceptable, the more aggressive we can be as a community to protect our residents, I would be in support of. And I think this is a good place to start. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flowers. Councillor Ames.
Thank you. Thank you. First, welcome, Senator Lovely. I see her here. And, but I just have, this is $100,000. And I just have questions in terms of how much has already been expended. What is the length of time that you think that this $100,000 will fund this project moving forward? Pretty much that's all I need to know, just to make sure that this is going to be an appropriate amount of money for what you need to do.
And that would be a question for maybe Mr. Ailes or the mayor?
I think it's more for Jacob. I'm going to add Jacob
Okay.
in terms of how much, in terms of what this money will buy, right? Jacob, if you would, because we go ahead, Jacob.
Thank you.
Right. So I'll let Gloria speak to any funds that we've already spent to date. But as far as the money going forward, the intent is essentially that to delineate the extent of it so we understand what sort of problem we might have. I think it'll go a long way. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to maximize the existing monitoring well network that we might have on other properties down gradient so we can lower the cost burden on putting additional sampling points in. But really the intent is to get everything delineated to then understand whether or not we have a problem that we have to remediate or if it can essentially stay where it is and it's not presenting a significant risk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Gloria, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, and as far as the funds going forward, so since this is such a moving issue right now across the nation, mostly for these airports that have been using it constantly, and it is such a huge cost to these airports, these communities, there may be a federal grant that comes out of this because of what is going to be required for the mitigation. We just don't know what that is now. But right now, I know there was a bill that was already passed as far as since airports have been required to use this, by the FAA, by the Federal Aviation Administration, since they had been required. Well, now that we can no longer use this and it should not be used, maybe mitigation in the form of federal grants being used. So that $100,000 right now is to cover the expenses and also the known expenses that we're going to do in the scope of work. But as of now, there's a huge movement across the nation for airports to get coverage for this foam that was required for accidents and incidents and training events.
Thank you. Scott, Councilor Houseman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I have a question in a moment for our budget analyst, Mr. Perry, just so he's sort of on deck. I just have a request that the report that is being referenced, that Ms. Bouillon read in the first place, that a copy of that be forwarded to the city clerk's office. I'd be interested in taking a look at it, and at least having it on file in the clerk's office, I think, is something that we should make sure happens. And then my question to Mr. Perry, and if Mr. Ailes wants to chime in as well, this funding is coming from the Airport Enterprise Fund. I wonder whether or not the Water Enterprise Fund would, down the road, be a potential source, if need be, for doing testing, given that it relates to our drinking water. Thank you.
Mr. Perry?
Sure. Thank you, Councilor. Quick comment, and then I'll answer your specific question, and certainly Brian can weigh in. The retained earnings of the airport have, as I wrote to you, $643,779 as certified and available for transfer by the city councils. There are certainly sufficient funds for the $100,000 to cover that. And just to expedite things, you're going to have a quick one on $32,000 is sufficient funds for that transfer when the council president gets to it. With regard to the Water Enterprise Funds doing this, possibly, but watching the amount of funds we have seen certified and retained earnings for the airport over the last several years, Council, my instincts tell me, absent any additional knowledge, we've had quite a large amount of funds certified in retained earnings for the airport, and I would probably suggest to both the administration and certainly the council that we probably look there first. I don't know how much they're going to really need, but I'd be more inclined to go in that direction first. There's quite a bit of funds for the airport retained earnings. The water account, to refresh your memory, we use that oftentimes to offset fees in like in the next fiscal year. So we want to be a little careful on that. So my instincts at this stage would be to hopefully stay with the airport funds. And if necessary, if we really get into trouble, maybe we could explore that if necessary.
Understood, and thank you.
All good, Council Houseman?
Yes, thank you very much.
Council Feldman, please.
Thank you. Yes, I have one kind of two-part question regarding timing. I think this is a really important exploratory phase that we need to start. And I was wondering how soon, if we approve the transfer, how soon can we start? And then how long would the testing take where we could have some type of actionable data that could be reported back to us about the levels, just looking at timeline?
So I can just speak right now. So and then I can have you follow up if you need to. So we already have results from the 2 tests, and like I had said earlier, we have those results. It does show a decrease in the level of PFAS in which the area in which the petroleum and the release were tested for, and so we do have that data available currently. And the ongoing testing, which has to be conducted, we're narrowing down the exact location, and that scope of work, that will be something that's upcoming, and so we will share the results with you.
Thank you. Council Feldman, you good with that?
So I guess I'm just wondering, with the transfer of the money, what testing would be started when? What additional testing would be started and when?
Mr. President, could I on that?
Of course, Your Honor.
So I think Council Feldman I think I'm going to ask Mr. Butterworth to speak again in a minute, but our desire is that this testing was done yesterday. So, you know, the scope that Mr. Butterworth put together, I think we're ready to go with, you know, pending the approval of the transfer here. So, Mr. Butterworth, can you share a little bit about the timing, the hoped for timing for getting this work?
Sure, absolutely. So we would be ready to initiate the work as soon as we're authorized to proceed, and I would expect that from the time we're given the green light to move forward, we'd have results within 2 to 3 months.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council Flowers.
Thank you. I just have one quick question for Mr. Butterworth, if possible. I'm just curious where my understanding of PFAS that they don't break down well. What does a decline in levels indicate, that they are slowly breaking down, or would it indicate movement through groundwater that you'd be looking for in other wells?
That's a good question. So we always sample monitoring wells over time because you can get seasonal or temporal changes in the data. So you can't necessarily rely on a one-time sampling event to be representative of basically the conditions. So the decrease tells me that the likely real, quote unquote, real concentration is lower than what the initial sampling results indicate. I do not think that we have a migrating source per se, because we know from the historical research that we've done, there's no fire foam training that's gone on. One event is all that we're aware of, and we know they don't store that on the property. So I think what we're dealing with is probably what we call a stable plume, where whatever was released has expanded to where it's going to expand to, and that's it. But we just have to know where it went at this point.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Director of Engineering and Public Services, Michael Collins, would like to speak. Mr. Collins?
Yeah, good evening, Mr. President.
Good evening.
I just wanted to be crystal clear that just to allay any fears, we have tested the drinking water 2 times, one time of our own volition under a previous, a few years ago, PFAS compounds were not regulated by anybody, and they were seen as an emergent contaminant, and EPA wanted to gather some data. So they asked cities and they asked water suppliers to test their water. We did so. We participated in that round of testing, and our water was non-detect. There was no PFAS detected at that time. We went a step further when we reached out to the lab that did the testing, because it's important to understand that the parameters we're dealing here are parts per trillion, and 1 part per trillion is very difficult to envision. And one helpful measure that analogy that somebody gave me was it's 93 million miles to the sun, and 6 inches of that journey part per trillion. So we're talking incredibly small. So it makes it very actually measure in a laboratory setting. These tests are quite expensive, because when we're requiring them to get down into the single parts per trillion, it's very difficult to do. And Jacob could tell you that the actual testing is incredibly tedious. It requires the person that is collecting the sample to actually not shower for 3 days, to not wear any perfume, not wear any makeup, not have any waterproof clothing on whatsoever, not have washed their clothes recently, not to use anything but stainless steel in the sampling. We all, like as engineers, we all carry these little Write in the Rain notebooks. Those are loaded with PFAS. So it's very difficult to get a clean sample, just by way of perspective. Last year, DEP asked if we would mind if they could test our water again, our drinking water again. We said, of course they could. So DEP came in and sampled our drinking water and performed their own tests, and again came up with non-detect in our drinking water. So the PFAS compounds of any kind, even down to the single parts, are not in our drinking water. So that's something we're very confident of. And even if they were, one of the recommended ways of removing them is with activated carbon filter beds, and that's exactly what we have anyway. So we're in a very good position there. So I just felt it was really important for everyone on the call and everyone listening to understand that we're confident beyond a shadow of a doubt that our drinking water is not impacted. In this particular area where the testing took place, it's actually not in the Wenham Lake watershed, and the groundwater doesn't go towards Wenham Lake, but some of these compounds have been detected in right on the edge of the Wenham Lake watershed. So we're being extremely cautious to make sure that we understand where the limits of the plume are. We're fortunate that it's very shallow to bedrock in this area where we're testing. There's only a few feet of soil on top of the bedrock. And in order for any groundwater to make it towards Wenham Lake, it has to actually daylight itself at the airport brook by the soccer fields, because there's a wall of ledge there that forces all the groundwater to become surface water briefly. And we're gonna, as part of the next round of sampling, we're gonna test the airport brook, which we're confident is clean, but we'll have numerical proof that it's clean. So anyway, I felt it was important for everybody to hear that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that our drinking water is free of these compounds. And while this isn't the science is emerging on this, and it's difficult to say if you have PFAS at extremely high levels, thousands of parts per trillion. It's much easier to correlate health effects. It's more difficult, and I think the science is still emerging as to what these kind of numbers would mean. As Jacob pointed out, every time you're flossing your teeth or getting a pizza or drinking a cup of coffee from Starbucks, you're drinking PFAS. So it's really difficult to get rid of this stuff. It's absolutely everywhere in the environment, unfortunately. Just want to stress that we are confident that our drinking water is free of these compounds.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Councilor Houseman again.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. I just want to thank Commissioner Collins for both the clarification and clarification and reassurance on those points. At the same time, I would suggest that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The fact that what was undetectable before, to me at least, is not necessarily reassuring, because detectable levels has, it seems to me as a non-scientist, a lot to do with what your threshold is below which you are trying to test. So hopefully the testing that is done will enable us to sort of clarify whatever the level is that we might potentially have to address. And I guess if my last comment or question would be if Mr. Butterworth wants to sort of in any way respond to the clarification of Commissioner Collins. Thank you.
Well, if I could just quickly, Councillor, we did confirm that the testing limits, the limits of the previous testing that we've done on our drinking water, were as basically as low as science can at this time, which is less than 2 parts per trillion. So the number, if there was something to detect, it's less than 2 parts per trillion. And DEP, EPA, everyone considers less than the threshold to be 0. So we test for a number of different compounds. Jacob could tell you there are thousands PFAS type compounds, and we tested for the most common ones that would be expected to be even possible to find in our type of environment. So we do know our detection limits of our particular testing laboratory. Every lab's different, and we did investigate our limits.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. I know you and I have talked about this subject in the past, so I'm sure it won't be the end of the discussions, but I appreciate your clarifications on what's already been discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Houseman. Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Ms. Bullion.
And I just have one more comment from Mina Arias from Anderson and Krager on the use of PFAS.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mina Macarius. I'm outside counsel to the airport. We've represented the airport on various matters. We've also represented several airports in the state now in connection with PFAS contamination. I'll be very brief. I know you have a lot on your agenda. There, just to add a couple of notes from some of the other communities we've worked with, that for those on this conversation, but also those possibly listening at home. The point that was made earlier about the difference between the Beverly Airport and other airports that are commercial service is an important one. In both Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, for instance, where there is, and Barnstable, where there's regular testing of AFFF, the concentrations detected to date have been much higher than what you're seeing here. And Mr. Butterworth has already explained the science, but that's an important thing to keep in mind. The one event is a blessing for Beverly that was the only use you have. The fact that it happened in 2009 also means that it was at a time when a slightly less PFAS-laden AFFF compound was used than other AFFF that had been in use and had been required to be in use by FAA prior to 2001 or 3, I believe. Other just couple of things to assure you that I think this struck us as a situation that's well under control from our experience. One, as mentioned before, the real effect from health as it's understood is for drinking water. The fact that you have municipal water, and the municipal water, as tested multiple times by Mr. Collins and his team, is not showing these detections, is a very good sign. And the charcoal filters do work. In Martha's Vineyard, where there has been an impact at down gradient drinking water wells that are household wells, simply putting in a point of entry treatment, a POET system as it's called, right at the house with charcoal filters has actually brought the levels below what's considered a problem for any health reasons. So it is certainly a serious issue. It's one that's facing a lot of communities across the country, a lot of airports, especially, but it is one that you have sort of the best possible conditions to address given the prior sampling you've had, the early efforts to address it here since you were already looking at the known petroleum release, and the very, very limited use. The last thing I would say as relates to the funding is that one of the things that we're working on with Gloria and her team will also be making sure that the proper insurance carriers are notified. We have been able to obtain some insurance coverage in other communities. It's excluded from general liability typically, but not necessarily other policies. And there are also communities around the country that have started pursuing the manufacturers of these materials for damages. No cases resolved yet, so it's probably premature to talk about that at all, but that is another avenue in addition to the funding at the federal. And I know there was one bill in the, I think, prior session of the legislature that added some funding as well. So that's just a little bit of reiteration on that, and appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Macarius. Anybody else have anything to add? Hearing no questions or comments, no further questions or comments, I'll close this public hearing, refer that matter to the City Council for a vote to approve the mayor's request. Ms. Kent, roll call vote, please.
Ames?
Yes.
Feldman?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Flowers?
Yes.
Brady?
Yes.
Houseman?
Yes.
Rand?
Yes.
Rotundo?
Yes.
And Guanxi.
Yes. Ms. Kent, let's move on to our next public hearing, also dealing with the airport on order number 89.
Order number 89, order that the City Council of the City of Beverly hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27th, 2020 at 8:10 p.m. Remote on Google Meet live stream on BevCam relative to the mayor's request for transfer of $32,000 from Airport Enterprise Fund balance to match Mass DOT grants.
And Mr. Ailes looks ready to go on this one. Mr. Ailes?
Very quickly, these transfers are related to two grants that were received by the council the last meeting. And these are the match components for those grants. One is for snow blower attachment, I believe, and the second one has to do with tree removal on the property.
Thank you, Mr. Ailes. Ms. Bullion, do you have anything to add on this one? This is your area.
Just that we were very fortunate with the grants that we were awarded for 100%, and for the grants that were awarded at 80%, given the current state as well as nationwide. So this is for our continued operations and vegetation management and safety compliance for the airport. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bullion. Any questions from members of the city council or comments? Hearing no further questions, we'll close. Go ahead. I'm sorry, did I miss you?
Yes.
Oh, there you are, Scott Houseman, me.
Sorry,
Okay.
Mr. President. Yeah.
That's okay.
Just a quick question of clarification, actually two questions. One has to do with if someone could explain to me what a mower with solar canopy is. Is that just a sunscreen, or is there some solar energy component? And then secondly, if you could just elaborate on the match, no match terminology and how that applies to the appropriation here. Thank you.
As far as the mower canopy, the state has initiated a airports going green kind of policy. So anything equipment that we need, they have been looking at ways that they can use battery operated solar. And so we were very fortunate to fall in the category of something that we actually needed, the mower, and have it also be considered a going green piece of equipment for the no match and match component. It involves coming from our fund balance 20% match, and no match is the 100% grant funds, if that makes sense.
100% grant funds, meaning the airport does not need to come up with any of that money. All we need to do is accept it as in the form of a grant.
That's affirmative.
Great. And in terms of the solar canopy, so that actually will provide a some kind of solar energy charge to a piece of equipment in
Yes,
concept?
that's correct. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Houseman. Anyone else? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the mayor's request.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Kent, roll call.
Ames,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Flowers,
Yes.
Frady's,
Yes.
Houseman,
Yes.
Rand,
Yes.
Rotundo,
Yes.
and Guanxi.
Yes, Ms. Bullion, thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate your efforts up at Beverly Airport. And Mr. Ailes, as always, thank you for your comments. Let's move on to our final public hearing on order number 79. Ms. Kent, could you please read that order and then read the letter that was presented to us?
Order number 79, that the City Council of the City of Beverly hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27th at 8:20 p.m. remote on Google Meet, live stream on BevCam relative to the Beverly Retirement Chapter 188 Act of Acts of 2010 relative to municipal relief to retirement system. Dear Honorable Council, Chapter 188 of the Act of 2010, an act relative to municipal relief established under local option, a retirement system may increase the base of a retiree's benefits that any cost of living adjustment, COLA, would apply to. Currently, any COLA voted by the Retirement Board applies to retirees first, $12,000 of pension benefits. Recently, the Retirement Board voted to grant a 3% COLA, which took effect in July of each year. A 3% COLA applied for the first $12,000 of benefits represents $30 each per month per retiree, or not more than $360 annually. Retirees receiving benefits of less than $12,000 receive a 3% on their total pension benefit, which is less than the full values of $360 annually using the 3% example above. As its January 30th, 2020 meeting, the Beverly Retirement Board voted 3-2 in favor of increasing the COLA base from $12,000 to $13,000 to take effect on July 1st, 2020. If approved by the Beverly City Council, this adjustment would apply to a retiree's first $13,000 in benefits for any future COLA. To illustrate this proposed adjustment, if the board were to grant a 3% COLA on $13,000, the new monthly COLA amount would be $32.50 per month per retiree, as opposed to $30 if the base remains at $12,000. $390 versus $360 per year. Currently, there are 478 retirees in the Beverly retirement system. If all retirees received full $32.50 per month, which they will not, the estimated additional annual cost to the retirement system is $1,186,420. As this is a local option, the Beverly Retirement Board respectfully requests a consideration of increasing the COLA base amount from $12,000 to $13,000 effective July 1st, 2020. Respectfully submitted, Richard Pierce. Thanks, Paul.
And this is strictly a decision that the council has to make, but I think that we'd like to hear from a few people. And I know Mr. Pierce is on the line. Mr. Pierce, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Mr. President. Each year, the retirement board votes on a COLA for its retirees. 9 out of the 10 years that I've been on the board, we've approved a 3% COLA. It was always based on the $12,000. 2 years ago, we came to the council with this same request. We were defeated 5-4 on the council vote, but we were told to bring it back. They believed in it. Even some of the councilors that voted no said, we do believe in this and we want you to bring it back to us. So here we are. I want to present it again and have you look at it. And I also want to point out that a couple of things for the retirees. Their costs are always going up. This year in 2020, Medicare Part B for the retirees that were actually forced into using Medicare Part B, that's increased $9.10 a month. So this could help offset that a little bit. And it's also interesting to know that the city of Peabody back in December took a vote to increase their COLA base from the minimum of $12,000 like ours, but they went up to $15,000 for their base. That was a very impressive move in my mind. Beverly sits in the bottom 25% of 102 retirement boards. There's only 26 that sit in that minimum category of 12,000. There are 23 communities are at 13,000, 28 communities at 14,000. There are 9 at 15,000, 7 at 16,000, 4 at 17,000, and 5 at 18,000. So you can see it is spread out all over the place, and Beverly's at the lowest rung possible, and we've been there ever since I've been on the board. So I'm just asking for your consideration here. The retirees need it. It's only $2.50 per month per retiree. And if anybody has any questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Chief Pierce. Any questions for Chief Pierce? I'll go to our finance director. Mr. Ailes, you sit on the retirement board also. Do you have any advice or information for us? I know it's a decision that we have to make, but you are the finance director of the city.
Yes, I am. And I just want to be clear, my role on the retirement board really has nothing to do with any of my remarks this evening. I'm before you as the city's treasurer and really want to address some of the costs associated with the benefit that was outlined before you. And in fairness, to Chairman Pierce's remarks, the $2.50 per month per retiree that we're really talking about, It's actually probably less than that when you think about that's a pre-tax amount. So after federal taxes and state taxes come out of that, it's probably $1.90, $1.80 something per retiree per month. And that's really the benefit side of the equation. But I'm here to kind of outline really somewhat briefly for you the costs associated with this adjustment should it pass. And there's really three areas that I think you need to be aware of as a council member before you vote. The first is the real cost to the city. So every year the city pays an amount into the pension fund. In FY20, that amount was $11 million. That amount goes up $500,000 per year, per the adopted funding schedule that the retirement board has adopted. So based on a memo from PERAC's chief actuarial, the necessary appropriation into the pension fund, should this pass, would need to go up by $115,000 per year until the fund is solvent, which right now is projected to be 2033. So that's 12 years at an increased value of $115,000 per year. That's about $1.4 million in added cost to the city's budget. And I will just remind you of the remarks I made earlier this evening about the situation that the city currently finds itself in terms of decreasing revenues and increasing costs and the burden that that's placing on the city. The second piece I want to just highlight real quickly is the Chief Pierce mentioned that the city is in the lower 25% in terms of its funding level. That is absolutely true. I don't dispute that. The city is also in the lowest 25 percentile in terms of its funding ratio, meaning that we, in terms of being solvent, we are far behind most of our peers. And, I grew up in Beverly. I think Beverly's better than that, and we should strive to get better than that. This vote, if it were passed, would actually go in the opposite direction. And the funding ratio, when they recalculate it, would actually go down because your liabilities end up going up. And the third piece I wanted to talk about real quick is something that's kind of obscure to many people, but for us that live in the finance world, the bond rating is really important to us. And I mentioned briefly in my opening remarks the value of a downgrade in a bond rating and what that means in terms of millions of dollars in potential interest payments. That we maintain a high level of bond rating, those monies don't get spent on interest. They can go elsewhere in the budget. If we are unfortunate and receive downgraded bond ratings through this economic issue we're dealing with, then that can have a reverberating effect in the amount of interest we pay and actually suck additional resources out of the remaining budget and be forced to put that into interest payments related. So when we look at our bond rating, we need to look at the experts. So Standard & Poor's and Moody's, they do their ratings for communities. And in all of our rating reports, although we grade very well in terms of a bond rating, they say without argument that the report continues to focus on the pension system as a negative regarding our rating. And the funding ratio is too low. So we need to get this up. So if you were, anyway, I guess that's it for that third point. I would just end with an overall kind of observation. As council members and policymakers of the city, you all are in a fortunate position where the city is able to rely on multiple financial experts. We've got your budget analyst, Mr. Perry, myself as treasurer and finance director, our city auditor, who also has a stake in or a vested interest in making sure the city is solvent and responsible in their finances. Collectively, we have close to 100 years of financial management experience, believe it or not. And I think that speaks volumes, the fact that all three of us unanimously are recommending against this vote, especially in the climate we're facing in the fiscal year headed our way, and also the multiple fiscal years to come. So thank you very much for affording me an opportunity to talk on this.
Thank you, Mr. Ailes. Does anybody wish to make a comment on this or have a question from the council? Councilor Rand.
Thank you. Thank you for the information, and also thank you to Jerry Perry for a memo highlighting a lot of those same details. I have a question, because last year I was one of the people who voted for the increase. I guess I'm wondering, last year we were in a really great financial position, and the recommendations were still to not vote for this increase. And I understand the funding ratio and, bond ratings. I understand the value of that and the long-term value of having great interest rates. But I guess I'd like to know, in what situation would it be appropriate to increase this funding? Or do we just continue to remain, at the lowest tier of this COLA increase? Where do you see it being recommended to do this increase?
Is that a question to
Is
me?
that a question for Mr. Ailes? Yeah, I think so.
I think that answer is somewhat subjective, frankly. I think as a finance professional, I would like to see the funding ratio be significantly higher than it is right now. And you know what the market's been doing. So the funding ratios that we're working on in our analysis are old, and we all know what's happened the last month. So funding ratios now are probably lower than they were 2 years ago. And so until that funding ratio begins to trend upward, I see that, taking resources from other areas of the budget that we're struggling to fund in the coming fiscal years and putting it towards this initiative, although, I don't dispute the worthiness that Chairman Pierce highlights in his letter, and I agree with my colleagues on the board about their viewpoint of that, but I think that there are more pressing and important issues that are facing our city right now, and to take an additional $115,000 out of the budget every year to place in this to support this is really a difficult choice to make, and I would encourage you to try to make not always the easiest decision, but the one that's going to position the city best financially to get through this recession.
I have a follow-up, President,
Please.
if that's okay. Thank you.
Of course.
I agree. I think, that it's not about making the easiest decision. And I think our vote last year showed that it's not an easy decision. But I guess I'm going to push a little bit on that, because does that mean we wait until 2033 to increase COLA? I guess that's my question.
That's a follow-up question from Mr. Ailes?
Yeah, to Mr. Ailes and also our own budget analyst.
So I'll start, and then I'll let Mr. Perry obviously make some remarks if he has any. But the 2033 is a target, right? And that's constantly moving. And I think we'll find that after we revalue the pension system, that target could shift. Okay, so it could shift and become sooner, or it could, which I hope not, that it get pushed out later. And this would most certainly have a negative impact on that position. But I don't think you have to be 100% funded in order to take on this initiative. I'm just concerned that we're lagging behind many of our peers in terms of funding ratio, and I'd like to see us get in a more competitive position before we obligate additional funds that frankly the city doesn't have right now.
Councilor Rand?
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Councilor Frades.
Thank you very much. Chief Pierce was 100% right about what happened last year. He made such a compelling, and they did, argument for it. We try to accommodate, we try to compromise, and we wanted to do a 12.5 adjustment last year, going to a full 13 for this year. Unfortunately, the rules don't allow for anything but $1,000 increment. So unfortunately, it was defeated narrowly, as we heard. Very sympathetic. Obviously, I think Brian said it best, when we can do better than this as a city. However, I think this is the first vote of many that are upcoming where we have to look at the city finances. We're in the middle of this pandemic. not just for the virus and everything it's done to humankind, but also the financial devastation that it's wreaking and about to become real on all of us. So I'm going to agree with the troika of finance experts and vote against it. Thanks.
Thanks, Council Frades. Council Flowers?
Thank you. I guess I just wanted to voice some of the similar questions or concerns that Councilor Rand has already voiced, but I won't restate what she said, but I do just want to say, I guess, that I also was one of the councilors who voted in support of increasing the COLA base last time. And I was wishing, as the chairman was talking, I was wishing that we had actually voted when Peabody did, because in December, because I would have surely supported it again. I think the pandemic and what's happening to our city's financial state, along with our Commonwealth and our nation and our world, in fact, is making it harder for me to vote to financially commit to it, even though my heart is surely with the retirees, and I would like to see us do better in terms of our COLA base. I guess what I would like to just put before us is that just as we have a plan to move towards fully funding our pension system and having solvency there, I would like to see us have a plan to also do better for our retirees in terms of not lagging behind. We're lagging behind in terms of funding. We just heard Mr. Ailes rightly say that, but we are also, in my opinion, lagging behind a lot of our peers in terms of our COLA base for our retirees. So I would love to see us be able to do better in that regard as well. I think the difficult part is just the timing of when this vote is coming and what's happening to all of our financial systems. But my heart is absolutely with our retirees. I think we know that that is money that these are local folks that stay in our local economy. It's surely needed. And I would love to see us be able to put a plan in place to address that when things begin to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Flowers. Ms. Ogilevowitz. Carol, are you with us? I think you disappeared. I'm going to go to Councilor Ames. Oh, you're still here, right? Turn your microphone off. That's better. We can hear you.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President and council members, for allowing me to speak tonight. I also have 3 points, 3 bullet points that I wanted to touch on regarding this issue. As some other people have said, 2 years ago, we did reach out to Jim Lamenza, who's the actuary at PERAC, to get his opinion of what this would cost the city. So rather than just give the retirees the increase, although deserving, and we all understand why, we also need to know what the financial cost is. So that did come in at about $1 million, which at the time was, enough for me to say, okay, that can affect our bond rating, as Bryant spoke to. It's also, although I will say this just as a point, that although the retirement board is autonomous, the retirement system does not fund itself. So it receives its funding from the city. It cannot fund itself. So any of these increases, that's why it really needs to go before the council tonight. So that was 2 years ago, and I know it was a close vote, and it also gave me pause that, I just wanted to have a little bit more background to it. So this time I did my own analysis, and what I did is I looked at the communities around us and what their funded ratios were. So we are on obviously the lowest end at 12,000, but there are also other communities who are at 12,000 who have great funded ratios. And not to get deep into the weeds, but I've got a couple of graphs. I don't even know if you can see this, but I'll just highlight what it is. So the current, our current bond rating on January 1 of 18, which is our most recent valuation, is 57.3%. Right, so that's just the ratio. The average of every other, if you put all the other communities at 12,000, is 64.6%. So we are below the average of all of those communities. Of those communities at 12,000, our funded ratio is below all of our neighbors at that point. So, and Peabody, I know has been mentioned before. Peabody is the only municipality that is lower than us that did grant this increase. But there are some communities in this analysis that are at $12,000 and they have funded ratios of 86% and 99% and 92%. And yet they're still only at a $12,000 funded ratio, $12,000 COLA base. So I want to take that even one step further, and I went to look at what it would be if we went to a $13,000 COLA base. And at the level of a $13,000 COLA base, again, we're lower than any local communities, any of our local communities around us. And we're also lower than what the average of people and of communities that are in a $13,000 COLA base is as well. So we're lower from a funded ratio for all of them the way it stands right now. And as Bryant mentioned, and others have mentioned, with what the market's going to do, it's only going to make that worse, and that funded ratio is only going to be lower. So that's a concern. I also think that, as Councilor Rand mentioned, what is the trigger point? So at what point would we say, okay, this is reasonable? And I want to ask myself that question too. And I think we would have to be at somewhere around a 75-80% funded ratio before we could look at something like that. And again, that's just me talking, but that's just me thinking about where we need to be. I don't know that we need to be at 100%, but I know we can't be at 53%. So I had that comment to make. And at that point, I think we could revisit it. But I think that's probably 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years down the line right now. So it's not something that is going to come up next year and we're going to be magically at 80%, where we won't be. So we just need to keep working towards getting those funded ratios up to the point that it would make some sense to increase the COLA base. I also sit in on a few of those bond rating calls that Bryant has, and can also validate the fact that that's what they bring up in every single one is our funded ratio is so poor. Sometimes hard to hear. We always like to hear all the great things we're doing, but that one's down. So that is a concern. I totally understand where that's coming from Brian. And as he said, it can cost us millions of dollars more. So although a retiree may get, an extra $2 a month out of it, it could cost us millions of dollars in interest costs for that. So you have to weigh what's on the best position for the city. Oh, and by the way, I meant to say this, but I'm actually speaking as the city auditor in my statutory position, not as a member of the retirement board, just so that that's on the record.
Thank you.
And then, so those were the two things. So certainly Jim Lomenzo being the actuary and the professional, I totally get what he's saying, and I agree with it. So then I wanted to say, well, what's different about Beverly? Why can't Beverly be like everybody else? Well, Beverly isn't like everybody else. We have a lower funded ratio than everybody else around us. Like, that's just a fact. So as much as I'd love to give retirees money, it has to make financial sense. So we can't just go from our heart, but actually go from what our finances tell us we're allowed to do and that we're capable of doing. And then the third thing that, came up, so that's kind of where I was before all of this other stuff happened. This would have been, 2 months ago. But the third thing came up, and that was the pandemic. The market crashed. I'm going to assume that there's going to be a drop in the funded ratio. I'm sure it's going to come up at the next bond rating call as to, what are our assumptions and have we changed anything when we're analyzing our bond rating? And I think, just as I've been around the city quite a long time now, but I think this council and this administration have worked really hard together to set aside stabilization funds and survive so that we can survive an economic downturn. But I don't think this decision, if you were to approve this, just makes it that much more difficult for all of the other decisions that are going to come before this board soon. So there's going to be a lot of financial impacts that we have to weigh the importance of the city and where they fall on the list. And this one at this point, I just couldn't support. Let me see what else I have here. So I guess I'll just close by saying, based on all of those factors, and not based on what every other community is doing, So when I did my analysis, I couldn't be like, I want to see I want to be like everybody else. In this particular case, we're not like everybody else. We have a lower funding ratio. If they choose to put themselves in a financial position that maybe isn't advantageous, that's their choice. But I don't think we should make a decision because everybody else is there, right? So we have to make it based exclusively on who we are. And so I would respectfully ask that you deny this request.
Thank you, Ms. Ogilvy. Councilor Ames?
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, this is a very thoughtful discussion and I appreciate it. And as a newbie on the board, I take this very seriously because while I want to do what's best for all of us, I am one that is generally driven by taking care of people first. And so this is like the perfect storm. Have to take care of the taxpayers as well as the retirees, as well as the people who are here. And so I agree completely with Councilor Flowers' comments. I think that for me, even though the times are tough, and I feel terrible, Mr. Pierce, because your timing could not have been worse for this, but I think that we need a solid plan to do better for the people who have worked very often for decades for the good of this city. And but I don't see right at this point a path forward. And I'm sure there are a lot of Ward 3 residents that, you know, will be disappointed. But I mean, this is, you know, this is a tough call, but I think that this year we have to figure out right now where we will be in the next 6 months, you know, and in the next year, will this be a quick return or not? And while I can appreciate that we're at 53 or 57%, and I think that's important for me, generally, I think it's important we take care of the people who work here. But this year, I think it's just, there's the uncertainty of the markets, the uncertainty of the budget, the uncertainty of what will come out of Washington and Beacon Hill is just overwhelming. But thank you for bringing it to us. I think these are the important questions that the council needs to be discussing. So thank you. And thank you everyone for your thoughtful analysis too.
Councilor Houseman. Councilor Houseman, you with us? You may have nodded off.
Sorry,
there he is.
I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, I appreciate what all of my colleagues on the council have said to date, and certainly you know, the request by the retirees is just and equitable, and I in particular would second Councilor Flowers' request, and I perhaps underline it by saying that it would be good that if our financial team in the city, whether that's our budget analyst or the administration, or working in conjunction with each other, prepare some kind of written document, perhaps, that does spell out a plan or a criteria, which would be a reference point for us in determining when it would be financially appropriate for the city to grant the request of the retirees. Having said that, I agree completely with Councilor Frades on this point. You know, this is only the first of many difficult budgetary related votes that the council is going to have to take in the coming months. I don't think we've really begun to fully appreciate the difficulty of some of the votes that lie before us. as we struggle with the financial situation for the city. And while I wish it were otherwise, I don't see, for the points, I won't bother to reiterate, for the points spelled out by, the financial team for the city and our budget analyst, how we could possibly support what is, a just request, but the timing could not be worse, and the city is not in a position, in my opinion, to support the request at this time. I think we're going to find ourselves struggling many more times in the coming months with votes like this as we try to address our operating budget for the next year and the next year after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Houseman. Council Feldman.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor the point, but I just wanted to echo the sentiments of the other councilors before me that this is obviously really unfortunate timing, and it's a conflict with my desire for justice and equity mixed with, being kind of more fiscally conservative. So it's really looks like to be the first of a long line of challenging budget decisions that I think we will have to be looking at. And I also, though, would like to put my name on the list of counselors that would like to see some type of plan to specifically get the funding ratio up to put us in a more stable position for this type of request in the future, to have more of a goal or a timeline that we could look at to really bolster that part of it when we possibly can. So just wanted to share that before the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Does anybody else want to speak from the council or from the public? I don't have anybody, so let's go to our budget analyst, Jerry Perry, who gave us a memo on this request.
Thank you, Mr.
Perry, you're still with us?
Yes,
Thank
sir,
you.
I am. Thank you very much. I will try to be brief because I'll be repeating a lot of what both the finance director and the city auditor indicated, so I'll try to skip over some of the commentary. I think you know already in advance from the memorandums I forwarded you. I forwarded you 3 separate memos that kind of touch upon this, that I am recommending to the city council very strongly not to do this. Let me highlight a few pieces of data to help you understand better, and then I do want to address both Councilor Feldman and the other councilors, Councilor Rand, my thoughts of how to maybe help them out going forward. This is all coming from the audit report. At the end of 2017, when pension firms look at this stuff, they do it by calendar year. So at the end of 2017, the funded ratio is 60.17%. However, in the end of 2018, it dropped to 57.3%. That was during normal times, normal economic times. It's not during pandemic times. That really grabbed my attention when I reviewed that and wrote to you about that as well. The city of Beverly ranks number 77 out of 104 pension systems in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for its funded ratio. That's really not very good. The city of Peabody, as an example, which has been indicated as a template, ranks 88th. They're even worse than we are. And one of the reasons they have that problem is because they went up to the $15,000 COLA ratio, and that's causing them problems over there. System will be funded in 2033 as indicated. We have some flexibility on that. Maybe the pension board could take another look at that. The average pension salary in the city, as I understand it, is $28,600, to give you some perspective. The average retiree's age is 74 years of age. And the market value of the pension system at the end of 2018, which is the most recent information I can get my hands on, was $121.5 million. Now, I want you to put that in perspective here. We've all seen what's happened to the stock market in the last 4 to 6 weeks. And you can anticipate of $121 odd million has probably lost anywhere from 10 to 20 to, I'm hoping no more than 20% of its assets, which means that your funded ratio is certainly going to drop tremendously when they take a look at it at the end of the calendar year. So we are really going in a bad direction, which is no fault of anybody given the pandemic. In terms of funding, I wrote to you, as of now, it's subject to change. In FY21, PERAC is going to send a bill for the city to appropriate $11.9 million. And in FY25, it reaches up to $14.2 million. The information that you heard the other two finance officials talk about an additional $1 million increase, or about $115,000 a year. That was done by Jim Lomenzo 2 years ago. I respectfully disagree with that as your budget analyst. I think it's going to be higher, especially given the fact that the assets have probably lost anywhere from 10 to 20%. So what's going to happen here is we're going to see a dramatic bigger bill for pensions to be appropriated. And if you approve this, it's even going to make it worse than that, which is going to literally take money away from schools, police, fire, public works, and other needed revenues that we're going to need for the expenditures. So it's going to be a difficult situation, as already articulated. It should be noted, I know that under the leadership of Councilor Houseman, as well as Councilor Ames, we did a lot of work on the financial forecasting. The administration works hard on capital improvement planning, that all our models that we have worked on very hard, diligently, that the rating agencies look at, does not incorporate this proposal. We'd have to completely rejigger or redo those long-range planning if we were to do that, and that's going to cause you additional problems, especially with our debt position. With regard to other findings in the audit firm of Powers and Sullivan, the OPEB funding increased by $35.4 million at the end of 2018. I was really stunned by that. And the OPEB liability is now $339.8 million. That really took me back and scared me, quite frankly, in terms of that. Talking about the change of the percentages, we have a liability of $91.3 million that we got to come up with between now and 2033, and I can assure you that's increased a lot more because of the loss in the stock market, and this is only going to make it worse if you were to give this COLA increase. I was also kind of surprised, according to the audit report, that at the end of 2018, the pension investments showed a loss of 2.33%. I was a little surprised at that during what I would think is normal economic times, and that's going to make it more difficult as well. Finally, as I think I wrote to you back on April 2nd, I mean, one of the concerns I have from a management perspective, maybe we need to talk about this at another time, is that there's a problem with accounting for receivables from the housing authority between them and the pension board. This is the second year we've had the finding in the audit report. I'm not quite sure. I'm told it has something to do with the timing of this, but it's losing $419,151 of receivables that we could be dumping into the system. Certainly, I would encourage the retirement board to be more timely with that. That is a concern to me from a management perspective, which has an impact on our liabilities. Several of the councils did talk about what's the plan? What's the plan we should do? For those of you who may recall my memo, it was 2 years ago when we had this conversation, and I forwarded to one of the new ones that when I wrote at the time, my opinion was we could visit it, increasing the COLA, but down the road when we improved our liability position and got closer to 2033. I agree with Ms. Oglowitz in terms of, if you ask me my opinion, I would not be recommending to the city council to change this until we got to about 75. I could even live with 75%. 80% would make me happier, but anything below 75%, I would be I doubt very much I could recommend to the city council either now or into the future till we get to that point. And we are now at 57.3%, and it's probably lower given what has occurred at the stock market. I will assure you I've done a lot of work over my 40 plus years, public service in this area. The 100 years that Bryant mentioned, I think I have the majority of it, unfortunately. I can assure you if you approve this, both Standard & Poor's and Moody's is going to look at us as, what are we doing in the middle of a pandemic? And making an approval that's going to make more liabilities and more challenges, which several of you have already articulated. It's really going to, a distinct possibility is going to definitely hurt our bond rating. And I go back to the fact, we are not other communities. We built a middle school. We built, or we're in the process of building a new police station. We did not do a debt exclusion for either of them. And both myself and the finance director articulated last October, especially with regard to the police station, that we have to be very, very careful going forward in terms of how we spend our money. This would be it. Under normal circumstances, I could not even recommend it. The pandemic just makes it absolutely not the responsible thing to do to vote for this. And I'm getting the instinct that's the direction you're going. And finally, I wrote to you on April 15th, both myself, in my writing to you, I've talked to you a couple times. I've talked to some of you privately. You heard from the finance director in the beginning of this meeting of the serious concerns. I don't have to tell you about this, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse. It's obvious, as your budget analyst, I understand the politics of this. You're talking to an individual, he's a retirement government official. I get one of these pensions, and I understand the challenges, but there's no question it is absolutely in the best interest of the city of Beverly moving forward not to approve this. With the utmost respect to Mr. Pierce, his two colleagues who voted for it, and those retirees who would be impacted by it. Mr. President, members of the council, this is my strong recommendation that you not approve this, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do any councilors have any questions for Mr. Perry? Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to make a comment? Okay, hearing no further questions or comments, I'll close our public hearing. And I would entertain a motion to approve the request of the retirement board to increase the COLA from 12,000 to 13,000. If you vote no, you're against it. If you vote yes, you're for it. Ms. Kent, roll call, please.
Kane,
No.
Feldman,
No.
Flaherty,
No.
Flowers,
No.
Brady,
No.
Houseman,
No.
Rand,
No.
Rotundo,
No.
Guanxi.
No, so that fails 0-9. And that is the end of our public hearings this evening. I want to thank everybody for their patience, in their comments, in their great questions. The final thing we have on our agenda, we've been so fortunate to be joined by our state representative, Jerry Paracella, and our state senator, Joan Lovely. They've always been great about coming before the city council and providing us with information from the State House. I want to publicly thank Councilor Ames for going above and beyond and inviting State Senator Lovely to our meeting. Senator Lovely, are you still with us?
Okay, yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. And Representative Paracella, you're here also, correct? Yes, Jerry. Jerry, turn your microphone on, but I want to go to Councilor Ames first. You're the one that thought it would be a good idea to have Senator Lovely here. Why don't you share your thoughts before we hear from the senator?
Well, it occurred to me during my experience on the Financial Forecast Committee that state funding is really critical for what we do in terms of the budget, which is now. But I was actually talking with Senator Lovely about a totally unrelated issue when I asked if she would like to join. I think that for all of us, the more we can work together, the more we can understand the work that we're doing locally, the more powerful and effective we can be. And I happen to have known Senator Lovely for the better part of 20 years, wouldn't you say, almost?
Yes. Yep.
And I just am never, I'm always amazed with the depth, the length she will go to for her constituents. And it's extremely admirable. Her willingness to listen and understand, I think, just makes her a wonderful public official. And so I know that I don't know near enough about what's going on in Beacon Hill, and I'm really excited to hear what she has to say. So thank you, Senator, for being here tonight.
Well, thank you, Councilor Ames, and thank you to the entire City Council. And let me tell you that just to start off with is I think I got the best training in the world being a city councilor, and that's why we as councilors put constituents first. So I'm so grateful for the years that I received to put me in this position. And thank you. It's really an honor to present to you tonight. And I invited my wonderful counterpart, Representative Parasella. So we're going to kind of split this up a little bit. I'm going to start, and then I'm going to ask Jerry to join in and tell us what's happening on the House side. So let me just quickly tell you that we have passed a number of bills in response to the pandemic. And I'm just going to run quickly through them, and then I'm going to jump into some budget, which I have limited information tonight, but over the next 2 weeks, we're going to have a lot more information to share with you, so we're being told. But let me just quickly just talk to you about the bills that we've passed so far. We've done a bill on a moratorium of eviction and foreclosures. We've done a bill to protect the liability for healthcare workers and facilities acting in good faith while they're treating COVID patients. A bill, we did the Muni Relief 1 bill and the Muni Relief 2 bill. The first bill, Muni 1, is all town and city related on municipal budgets and borrowing, and suspends time periods for purchasing and extension of local tax payments, waiver of late fees and late payments for excise taxes, et cetera. We did an income tax extension, same as the federal government, and we allowed the sale of alcohol beverages by restaurants who are doing takeout. The Muni 2 bill was more school related. That's why we allowed DESI to waive the MCAS graduation requirement. Requires DESI to waive MCAS for the rest of the school year, which happened, and then allows DESI to certify 1/12 budgets for school districts, etc. A few other bills that we passed was suspend asset limits for cash assistance programs across the Commonwealth. We did a virtual notary bill because, as you can imagine, people are doing a lot of estate planning right now, and we want to make sure that they can get that done. We waived the 1-week requirement for UI, unemployment insurance, and we expanded unemployment in Massachusetts from 26 to 30 weeks. We have a number of bills that are in the pipeline to address the pandemic. Everything from well, probably one of the most important bills, there's a couple of them, is voting by mail. By the time our primaries come around in September and our final in November, we may not be able to be voting in person. So to also create a Massachusetts Paycheck Protection Program, a PPP, because we still have businesses that are ineligible for federal PPP. So we're really responding as a legislature to the pandemic and working very closely with our communities to make sure that we're hitting the mark, that we're listening to everybody, and we're able to really hit the mark. Let me shift over to budget really quick. I will tell you, it isn't pretty. We are looking at a $5 billion shortfall in the state budget for our FY21 budget. We are actually doing a RAND bill this week with a revenue anticipation note so we can borrow money to get through to fund our unemployment and our budget. So we are working hard. The Senate Ways and Means Chair, I can only speak on the Senate side, and Rep. Parasella will again speak for the House. The Senate Ways and Means Chair is meeting with us in caucus tomorrow, virtual caucus.
but he's putting together a much clearer picture for us in the next 2 weeks so that we know. And why is that? Why 2 weeks? Is because of the communication with the federal government. We need participation from the federal government in a large way. And he did tell us today, the Ways and Means Chair, that for the FY 2010 budget, I was not in the legislature at that time. Jerry, I'm not sure if you were. I think you were. But the FY 2010 budget, local aid cut was 20%, and Chapter 70 was level funded. So absent any federal participation, what the Senate Ways and Means Chair is saying it could be the same for FY 21. But he said he's feeling very encouraged about what he's hearing from Washington, and he'll have more in-depth information for us in the next 2 weeks. I will tell you, and Jerry will tell you, that House Ways and Means hasn't filed their budget yet. In fact, I think this week is their budget week. And neither has Senate Ways and Means has stopped assembling our budget as well. Again, just because of the realities of what's happening. So again, working together, we can, hang on 1 second, because my dog is at the door and she's going to bark. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Go outside. Go on. There you go. Bring a little levity to the.
That's good. We always enjoy that, Senator. We try to keep things light sometimes.
Sorry about that. I have 3 Labrador retrievers, and 2 of them now are outside sounding the alarm, whatever might be passing through the yard. I'm going to stop there and ask if Rep. Paracella could add what's going on the House side, and to see if we can give you a more complete picture.
Great. Thank you, Senator. Rep. Paracella. Thanks
Good
for joining
evening.
us. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yeah, as the Senator Lovely said, so typically this would be the week that we in the House would be voting on the budget. Normally, so the timeline is the governor would file his budget in January, which he did. Then we would have our budget come out in April, and we'd have it done by the end of this week. But it hasn't even been filed yet because just of the uncertainty of the revenue picture for the state. And as Senator Lovely said, we're looking at perhaps a $5 billion deficit. You know, things were going great last year. We had a $1 billion surplus. We had among the lowest unemployment rates in the country. And then the pandemic hit. In February, 17,000 people filed for unemployment claims in Massachusetts. This month, there were 600,000. So it's just an incredible increase in the amount of unemployment claims. That's probably, I would say, about 90% of the calls that our offices are getting now, calls and emails, folks trying to get help with their unemployment claims. So we've been working overtime to try to help out folks who have hit on hard times. And so I wish we could get, you've heard tough budget projections from Mr. Ailes and from your finance director and others. And I wish I could present a better picture for you, but it's going to be tough. We do have about a $3.5 billion in our rainy day fund, and we thought that was going to carry the day. But with that huge deficit that's projected, it's just that wouldn't even cover 1 year. So last year, you may recall, we passed the Student Opportunity Act, which provided Beverly about an extra $1 million in Chapter 70 money for education funding. I think it's going to be really tough to do that again this year. So it's going to be a really, really challenging budget picture for sure. Unlike the federal government where they can borrow money, we have to have a balanced budget. So we're gonna have a caucus tomorrow with the speaker and talk about some of the issues that are coming up. So hopefully we can have a little bit more information for you in the next couple of weeks. I know it's tough for you folks because you're relying on state aid to balance your budget or to come up with a budget. So we'll do our best to get you the information as soon as we can. Just want you to know, working with Senator Lovely, we're doing our best to take care of your constituents and our constituents. who are having a tough time. We will get through this together. And, I just want to let you know that if anybody who's watching on TV, anybody listening, if you have any questions or concerns, you're having trouble with your unemployment claims, please give my office or Senator Lovely's office a call, and we'll be there to help you out.
Thank you, Mr. Parasella. Councilor Ames.
Thank you. Thank you both. I have a couple of questions. One is specifically, as we go through the budget process, what do you honestly believe is our timeline? And I was hoping, Senator Lovely, you mentioned that there were a few bills that were moving through that were going to support municipalities. If you could speak to them more specifically, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Sure. So with regard to the timeline, we're being told that we are likely as a state are going to pass a 1/12 budget. And so we may not really have a full picture and a full understanding of what our state budget is going to look like until sometime over the summer. So we'll keep you updated on that, but that's what I'm hearing relative to relative to when we're going to be able to formulate and pass an official budget for the state. With regard to different types of bills that we're working on, let me just back up quickly. Rep. Parasella and I were on a call last week. I think the House was in on the call with Senator Warren and Senator Markey, and that was about the relief bill that was just being passed last week. The president signed, and the Democrats worked very hard to try to include relief for the states and local municipalities, and that was objected to by the other party. But they're going to be revisiting that in the next relief bill, because we know there will be another one, likely several. So with regard to bills that are filed specifically to municipalities, most of these bills that I'm looking at that are pending just with regard to the pandemic are addressing more at the business level for businesses, more at the grant level of like overtime for public safety personnel, grant program for temporary shelters in gateway cities. Beverly is not a gateway city, but Peabody and Salem are. I'm also looking at a bill that says it's a public safety personnel who contract COVID. They're considered on duty. So these are the types of bills that are being filed right now. We've got a price gouging program that could go business, residential, city. It widely covers all of it. So these are the types of programs and bills that are being contemplated immediately for this pandemic. And we're hoping, again, to be able to get some relief through the federal government directly to the states and directly to municipalities. That doesn't necessarily have to come through the state. It can go directly to municipalities. So we're working with our federal counterparts to be able to make that happen. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Senator. Councilor Williams, you good? And we'll move on.
I'm good. Thank you.
Councilor Rotundo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just actually want to make a comment to both Senator Lovely and Representative Parasella. I reached out to you in regards as a business owner back, I think, March 15th, and I got to just commend you and thank you more so about how responsive you've been, keeping us up to date as a business owner. I know a lot of the information when I first reached out was not even in the pipeline yet, and all I had asked is just keep us informed as a business owner, especially owning a restaurant in the food industry. I know, Mr. President can speak to the same nature of how we've been affected greatly by it, and it's made it easier. Not that it's nice to be able to have the information. And by you providing us with it, we've been able to share it through, Beverly Main Street and the Greater Beverly Chamber of Commerce to get other people involved to know about what's going on. So I just wanted to really thank you. I can't show you how much more appreciative I've been about the quick responses. I feel at times I've been more of a pain to you guys, continually, texting or calling you guys. And you always do make me feel that I haven't been, but I just want to again thank you guys for being very responsive to the businesses in the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Houseman?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank both Senator Lovely and Representative Paracella for their endurance and patience in hanging in with the council this evening. We're pushing 10 o'clock, and they're just now having an opportunity to sort of discuss matters with us. So I want to thank you both, and also thank Councilor Ames for the invitation. I actually have a process question, which is really, can the Senate and the House of Representatives vote remotely? How do you, I mean, our council is able to vote remotely as well as meet remotely. Are both houses able to do that? And are there any impediments to your ability to efficiently conduct the business of the state right now?
I'll grab that one first because it's great timing, Councilor Hausman, because we're going to be voting on emergency rules this week to allow us to vote remotely. So the state constitution requires us to assemble. So the lawyers were reviewing that, but at the end of the day, yeah, we are going to vote this week to allow for remote voting. So only a handful of folks will actually be in the House chamber, and then the rest of us will be voting remotely. So that will happen this week. We'll be voting on that this week.
And the same for the Senate. We had a discussion on that today. That revenue anticipation note that I mentioned is requires a roll call vote. So the Senate is also looking at the different options to be able to make that happen. And so yes, it will be adopting some emergency rules or changing some of our rules under this emergency to allow that to happen.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I want to make sure all our representatives, especially our local representatives, are able to assemble safely in this environment. So that's good news. It's been one of the things I've been wondering a lot about. We've certainly seen that on the national level. That they're still trying to work that through as well. So I won't belabor the point. Thank you very much again for attending with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Houseman. Councilor Ames, you're back.
Yes, I just have one last quick question. How can we help you? What can we do to either pass through information and do, things on the city level that help you help us?
I'll take that. This is extremely helpful. Actually, meeting with all of you and having this conversation and sharing information is extremely, extremely helpful. I'm doing this with other communities as well in my district. The more information we can share and the more communication we can have on a pretty consistent basis, the better it's going to be able to really get things done and understand what the needs are. Understand where the voids are that need to be filled. And so having this back and forth dialogue, even once a week or more, is extremely valuable. So thank you for this opportunity. And if there's a way that we can continue this, offline, but to be able to just talk to each other, just tell us, where the priorities are. That would be very helpful, especially as we go into formulating this next challenging budget. So thank you, Councilor Rames.
Yeah, and I would just add, and like as this Councilor Rotundo had said that he was texting and so forth, it's very, he said he thought he was being a pain, but it's actually very helpful because you folks are there in the community on the ground, talking to your constituents and letting us know what you're hearing is important, especially when it's a little bit tougher for us to get out into the community with the social distancing requirements. I mean, I do my best, to talk to folks, but obviously we can't do it in the same way that we normally would. So please reach out, and let us know what you're hearing because we're here to help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Paracello, and thank you, Senator Lovely. Thanks for joining us. I apologize that our meeting went so long, but we got a lot accomplished tonight, and I'm very proud of my colleagues on the City Council for the votes they took and the things that we approved. Does anybody have anything else to add? Really? Okay, that's fine. Oh, Council Flowers, I missed you.
No, you didn't. I wasn't typing fast enough.
All right.
It's just very brief. Just any counselors who didn't yet have a chance to send me a picture of yourself with your mask, so that we can put together a graphic from the City Council, just supporting the notion that really for mutual care, everybody being out in our community wearing their mask to protect their neighbors and themselves. If you didn't get to send me a picture of yourself with your mask, please do, and then I'll get that graphic out to all of us, and you can share that however you wish.
That's great, and it's really, really, really important that everybody abides by that and wears their masks. And remind people when you see them. You might not like what they have to say back to you, but it's important. It's about them infecting somebody else, and it's what we have to do right now. Believe us, there's those of us that have to work in those masks every day, and it's not very comfortable, but it's the right thing to do. So I really commend Council Flowers of not making light of the situation, but I think everybody would like to see the 9 of us all masked up, ready to go, be it at a meeting or going for a walk or in your yard or in your work environment. It's a good thing. And hopefully people will take note of that. So, Ms. Kent, we have a full City Council meeting scheduled for Monday, May 5th. No, May 4th.
Yep, May 4th.
May the 4th be with you.
Yes.
And we'll get back on our regular meetings the first and third Mondays of every month.
Correct.
And if anybody has anything to submit for next Monday, Ms. Kent would like it by?
Thursday at 2 p.m.
Great. And on the 18th, we'll have a meeting and we'll have 2 public hearings, one at 7:15 about the transfer for the sewer work and in the water work, and at 7:30 for the CPC funding. I want to thank Mayor Cahill and his staff for being here. Mr. Ailes did a great job. We always thank our budget analyst, Jerry Perry, for being here. Ms. Auga Levowitz was here from the city. I noticed Dylan Benson and Stephanie Williams and Karen Corridon were there keeping an eye on us to make sure we did things correctly. I hope I don't get an email tomorrow morning, but I may. That said, I would thank everybody for tuning in. BevCam did have some problems with transmission today. They will rebroadcast the meeting tomorrow, and then I'm sure a few more times throughout the week. That said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:54.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ames.
Yes.
Feldman.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Flowers.
Yes.
Brady.
Yes.
Houseman.
Houseman, yes.
He wants to stay.
Rand.
Yes.
Rotundo.
Yes.
And Guanci.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Everyone.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, stay safe.